welcome back to Beyond the Veil Tarot and Astrology. My name is Candice Marie. Thanks for joining me. I'll be your astrologer this month. Happy Tuesday, everybody. I hope your week is off to a great start. I'm back at it with another video. Wanted to put something together for you guys to talk a little bit about a brief overview for the month of October 2024. If you guys like my content and you want to see more of it, click the bell button below, subscribe to the channel. I'm here every Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and Sunday trying to make sense of what's going on in the cosmos. For many of you guys who are new to my channel, I always do 2 videos. I do a rather long video that's several hours long where I talk about all of the horoscopes for the 12 rising sun and moon signs. Those are out, so do consider checking out my October horoscopes if you want to see what the next month has in store for you. And make sure that you listen to your sun and your moon, as we are going to be having a solar eclipse in October. So it's going to be important to listen to all of the various horoscopes this month. A little bit crunched on time today, so I apologize. This might be a little bit of like a shorter video than usual, and I'm just kind of getting like wrecked with this eclipse. So I wanted to make sure that I was still able to kind of touch on the general themes and overview for October. So essentially we got a lot of stuff going on. We're going to be seeing the month kind of start off with a solar eclipse in Libra. This is the last solar eclipse we're going to see in Libra as a part of the South Node in Libra transit that we've been experiencing for the better part of the last 2 years. This will be taking place around 10 degrees. And for me, you know, the month kicking off with an eclipse gives us some insight into the area of our chart, Libra, which is going to, I think, be very important in this next month. For a number of reasons. Not only is that, but we have the Cazimi that's also kind of taking place today into tomorrow. So there's lots of things changing, new things setting up in the Libra area of our chart. But we're going to be seeing a whole lot of cardinal squares that are going to be going on. So if you're a cardinal sign, Aries, Cancer, Libra, or Capricorn, you guys might feel the squeeze a little bit more. But honestly, because the North and South Node are in Aries and Libra, I think everybody's going to be feeling that squeeze. As we're coming into this South Node solar eclipse, this is about embracing change and transformation in relationships. The fact that October is kicking off with a solar eclipse and some of the aspects that are being made, I feel like really are speaking to endings and new beginnings, as all eclipses do, but especially in the realm of relationships. Now, part of me thinks because we are going to see the luminaries, Mercury in superior position, the sun and the moon at 10 degrees within a wide trine to Jupiter, that this can be optimistic for many of us. This can be a welcomed change, better communication, necessary shifts and things that are going to end up bringing us better things down the road. And I'm hoping that you guys kind of keep that in the back of your mind as well. However, the broad themes of this eclipse is really about encouraging us to let go of outdated patterns in relationships and also personal identity, as it's in opposition to the North Node in Aries. The advice here basically is to welcome transformation, especially in how you relate to other people as well as yourself. And likely this is kicking off what might be about a 6-month period of major, re-evaluations or shifts that are taking place. Yes, eclipse season can feel a little unsettling, but ultimately I think some of the changes that are brought by this eclipse are going to be for, I think, aligning us with where we actually need to go. We will also see throughout the transits this month a few peppered in very fortunate Jupiter aspects. So if you guys hold tight for a second, I'm going to give you all of the lists of the best days for, certain aspects, the most challenging aspects days. And then I'm also going to talk to you guys about the days where you kind of have to work as a team and kind of put your heads together and figure out how to overcome some obstacles. But I'm liking the Mercury trine Jupiter transit. I feel like that can be very fortuitous, especially when it comes to clients, relationships, partnerships, announcements, news, travel, as well as the sun coming into a trine with Jupiter as well. So you guys want to look for those days as planets are moving through Libra, helping kind of align these new intentions from the solar eclipse with Jupiter, the great benefic. Now we are going to see a pretty interesting kind of mid-October to the end of the month. We are going to have like a several day period where we're going to be seeing the sun in a square with Mars. And Mars now in Cancer, it's coming into shadow now at the beginning of October. I remember telling you guys once we get past about the 4th or the 5th of October, and Mars hits about 17 degrees, we're going to start seeing that Mars is coming into the territory, which it will retrograde through later in the year. So watching planets in Libra square Mars in Cancer is definitely going to bring up, I think, some heated situations. You know, I feel like this is really set up by the slowing down of Mars, where we can see that there can be some challenges emotionally or on the home front or a domestic sense, or, you know, we may see more action revolving going on around our families or even in certain countries where there is a need to feel protective, defensive, you know, and obviously emotionally kind of charged when it's in this sign, in conflict with planets going through Libra. Particularly the sun is really what I'm talking about, but we'll see Mars and Mercury square as well. What this is going to be bringing up is a heavy focus on Libra energy. Suddenly Libra becomes the focal point of a T-square between Mars, which rules the North Node, and also a brewing square to Pluto in Capricorn. So when we look at the axis of Cancer and Capricorn, you know, it's going to bring up themes revolving around finding a balance between Cancer, home, family, domestic stuff, as well as, you know, home versus career, relationships, major changes and transformations out in the world. And that through relationships, that how we're relating to other people or the other people that come into our life that have an impact or an effect on these two particular areas in our chart. If you're a cardinal sign, you know cardinal signs are always very charged because they initiate things. So the positive is with all this Libra, we can be initiating new relationships, new partnerships, meeting new people, you know, building better bonds. But the challenge is that people are going to come into our life this month and they're going to kind of challenge us to say, you know, are we going to get out of the past? Are we going to continue some of these past behaviors? Or are we going to have to make a pretty dramatic kind of change when it comes to the future? Now, you know, obviously Pluto in Capricorn, it brings up heavy blocks, you know, fear, power struggles, and major changes when it comes to power and control. So this is where kind of like working together comes in as we see Mercury and the sun move through Libra and begin to kind of square these 2 points. Obviously, Libra is about, you know, diplomacy, and it's about others, and it's about relationships and being able to be a mediator and, you know, find balance and hear other people's perspectives and kind of, you know, go back and forth and try to kind of find like a middle ground. But I feel like a lot of the transits with the sun and Mercury, not only in a square to Mars where there can be some stirred up home and, you know, domestic stuff, but the squares to Pluto, both Mars coming into an opposition with Pluto by the end of the month and the sun and Mercury coming into a square is going to be about relationships and power and control dynamics. So it's going to be kind of, it's going to be tricky finding a balance between our need for harmony, right, Libra, and making major changes, Pluto and Capricorn, especially when it comes to leaderships or our careers or anything revolving around our long-term goals. So it's possible that with Libra kind of being the focal point between these 2 particular planets, that, you know, we're finding that, you know, relationships can kind of come under scrutiny. It's definitely a transit that can test some of the best relationships. It is possible when we see squares to Pluto that things can be destructive, but likely it's to kind of bring something up, purge something up, and allow it to be able to kind of get cleared out so we can kind of align with the right relationships, the right partners, find the right balance. So for many of us, we're going to be feeling like this month we're going to be redefining our boundaries and possibly even, you know, embracing more independence within partnerships, because we're going to be kind of dipping into the energy of the North Node, depending on what's going on with Mars, because Mars is the ruler there. Lunar transits are still very charged, so be mindful that whether it's a solar eclipse or it's a square or a full moon, with Mars in Cancer, we're going to be feeling those lunar transits a lot more strongly. And you guys can always catch my astro weather here on Sunday, and I'll take you through the week ahead, and we kind of look at what's going to be happening. So you might want to listen to that and kind of see how the moods are changing every 2.5 days or so as the moon changes signs. And also this is, I think, going to be about expecting changes, like I said, on the home front or on the career front, because it's kicking up all of this energy between these two particular signs. Now, when we have a south node eclipse that kind of comes up, this is where we are closing things out, right? Because the south node represents kind of clearing in the past, and all this Libra energy is kind of ruled by Venus's trek through Scorpio, which can be incredibly passionate, devoted, deep, but it can also be about exposing some of the shadow side of relationships and some of the more toxic things that can kind of come up that need to be kind of purged from our subconscious. I think that this is giving us the opportunity with the eclipses to start up new contracts. Find new support, meet new people, initiate new agreements, bring in new clients. So it can be good in that sense, especially with a rather loose but still kind of trine to Jupiter that does seem to signify that through unity and coming together, two can be better than one. And obviously, really the only way out of October is head on through it, together. That's the only way that we're going to be able to get through it, both personally as well as collectively. I would encourage everybody to be mindful of some of the ego games that can be coming up, especially as we start seeing, Mars kind of tangoing with the sun in a several days square, where the sun can really show where we can have a tendency to be too overly focused or overly confident in one area. The sun does not perform well in Libra. You guys have to remember that this is putting the planet, which deals with identity and ego, into Libra, which is about other people. So it's debilitated as it goes through this sign. Granted, we'll see some trines to Jupiter, sure. I think that regardless, there is a tendency with the Sun and Mercury moving very closely this month that our mind can be like on fire, where there's just too much going on, too much relationship chatter, too much back and forth with other people. Things feel very overwhelming, or it's difficult to kind of communicate. So we're becoming aware of that at the end of September, going into the beginning of October, that there can just be too much on our mind when it comes to other people's things. And so that kind of kickstarts some of the aspects as it starts coming into a square with Mars, where we're being emotionally charged and kind of asked, okay, create change or pay attention to our emotions, or, finally let go of things revolving around the past. And we can do it the easy way, where we're incentivized maybe with some of the trines to Jupiter to better communicate, to learn something new about relationships, to, ask questions, to find ways to be able to meet other people halfway. Or we can kind of wait until, mid to the second half of October, when Mars is opposing Pluto and, planets in Libra are starting to come into a longer square with Mars, and then also with Pluto, and we kind of get our butt kicked a little bit. So we want to be willing to do this and kind of work together and find support through the Libra and Gemini area of your chart, because that's where you're going to get the most support with some of the trines this month. Be mindful of your actions. Be mindful that there can be a lot of emotionally charged things, a lot of emotional reactions as planets in Libra start squaring Mars. Once we start feeling overwhelmed and as if there's too much going on in relationship to other people or something outside of us, it can have a tendency to kind of rub us the wrong way, and it can bring up a tendency to be defensive or to be a little emotionally unhinged with Mars going through Cancer. I feel like, in spite of that, if you're mindful of your actions and also your emotional reactions, and you're leaning into some of the trines that you're going to see during Libra season, so we follow Venus, with Venus trining Saturn and also trining Mars. So there will be several periods where Venus will trine Saturn, we will see Mars trine Saturn, and then we will see Venus and Mars start to trine each other. So we're going to have a grand water trine in the skies for a little bit. And so, yes, we can have a deeper understanding of one another. We can have a deeper understanding in relationships. But I do think that, Saturn is about foundations, right? It's about what's solid, and Saturn is retrograde. So it's reevaluating what it's going to hold on to and what it's going to let go of or dissolve. So being that Venus doesn't just deal with money and values, it deals with relationships as well. With Venus in this particular sign in a trine to Saturn and Mars, it tells me that some unions or foundations, they will falter, they will break down. We will see that. Pisces is about dissolving, Scorpio is about changing, Mars in Cancer is about reflecting, getting emotional, and cutting something off. So for some people, it can materialize as finally putting an end to something and it being very difficult, but also very therapeutic to kind of draw the line. I think that while some may break down, we may see that, this is creating opportunities to strengthen and further solidify some existing unions, because when Mars and Venus are in harmony with one another, they're working together. And Saturn is about, karma, and it is about timing, and it is about emotions, and it is about compassion and empathy. So it is possible that we can work through certain issues by having a better kind of emotional understanding and also approaching our relationships and our emotional reactions with a little bit more maturity. So emotions will run deep. Tempers can definitely flare during some of these transits with the squares between Mars and also Pluto. Partners or people outside of you are definitely going to try to poke the bear and get a reaction. But I definitely feel like this is a time where we can tame the intensity with a newfound sense of commitment and emotional maturity. And I aid a lot of that to the trines to Saturn. I do think that we are being asked right now with Mars and Venus trine Saturn to be compassionate, to forgive other people, to be willing to heal and kind of, dissolve certain things that may not necessarily be beneficial emotionally in the long run. So with that being said, some of the big, transits for the month, obviously we start October with the sun moving through Libra. That is going to continue, really all the way up until the 22nd, and then the sun will enter into Scorpio. So most of this month is going to be Libra. We will see on the 13th of the month, Mercury will enter into Scorpio, and this is going to be an interesting transit. As you guys know, when planets go through Scorpio right now, it's trining Saturn, which stabilizes. It's trining Mars, which is going to also give us some kind of oomph, some incentive. And it will be making oppositions to Uranus, right? So that does kind of create some shocks and surprises. But Mercury in Scorpio is a deep kind of introspective placement, I think, to have Mercury. It's about introspection and communication or research. So there's an emphasis on transforming the mind when Mercury goes through this sign, and transformative communication. So it's about finding yourself, kind of diving deeper into hidden aspects about yourself or your joint finances or your relationships. It's about having meaningful conversations, and perhaps those that have been avoided due maybe to fear or discomfort, that can be coming up as well. But now this can be a period where truth, is coming out, or there is something that's being uncovered, or feelings are kind of, needing aired out. So you'll see that on the 13th. On the 17th of the month, Venus will enter Sagittarius, so it's going to leave Scorpio and it's going to go into spicy Sag. Obviously, for my Sag, Sun, Moon, Rising people, this is going to be a good transit for you. This does have a little bit more flair and pizzazz when it comes to social stuff, when it comes to beauty and relationships. There's more of a flair for culture, travel, having adventure, that kind of stuff with Venus and Sag. And the one thing that we will see at some point is early on in the Venus and Sag transit, we will see Venus come into a square with Saturn. So not the easiest day for relationships and partnerships, and, be cautious in dealing with money and anything cosmetic around that particular time. Now, we will also see Jupiter turn retrograde this month. That's going to happen on the 9th. So when we have Jupiter turn retrograde in the sign of Gemini, we are reworking, reevaluating, rethinking, returning in some sense. Maybe we're reviewing something we've learned. Maybe it's what we believe in. Maybe it has something to do with, where we've been, learning or studying something. And this means that we're going to see something kind of slow down in regards to the expansion, maybe even the luck or the positivity of that particular house in your natal chart. Keep in mind that as Jupiter retrogrades and we get closer to December, we will be preparing for a second Jupiter square Saturn. So we had the first one in August, and honestly, I remember saying to you guys, it's economic. This will be about economic slowdown. This will be with delays that can be impacting, both Pisces as well as, Gemini areas of things. So that can be stuff like how there are restrictions and limitations to, media, right? Mail is Gemini, documents, package delivery, travel, free speech, laws revolving around speech or media, local communities. So unfortunately, Saturn in Pisces and that eclipse is doing what it was going to do. Or I said to you guys, we were going to see some massive storms. We were going to end up seeing that there was going to be dissolving or lack of security or I guess support when it comes to water. We saw some number of dams that have given out in the midst of some of the storms that have been happening throughout the South. There is still some storm activity or some warnings that are kind of hanging around right now for some of those areas. We see power lines down, communications down in some areas. People can't get around, streets are flooded, whole communities have been washed away. And it's textbook. Saturn in Pisces is the dissolving of borders or anything revolving around support when it comes to waterway, and the impact feeling bigger, right? And whether or not there is enough news, media, or attention on this situation, and like how communities are going to be able to, rebuild. And for some of these places, like I said, it looks like whole cities have been washed away. So it's just really, really unfortunate, and, positive thoughts with everybody who's in the affected areas. I would take into consideration that, because there's another one coming, I think this is going to be more the after effect of, well, how do things get rebuilt? And how does that impact, now several area codes that won't be receiving mail because they're underwater? How does that impact also the election process if communities are unable to exercise their rights, Jupiter, due to some of this extreme weather? And, how are we going to be looking at the delays that can also be happening because of other weather or other conditions or other limits or setbacks when it comes to transportation, import, export, that kind of thing. So you guys know I've been talking about that a lot the last week or so, but I mean, these are some very real concerns given the second square looming. And you'll feel the Saturn Jupiter square is kind of expansion and contraction. Saturn doesn't want Jupiter to expand too quickly. My Sag and Pisces risings, I think you guys are going to feel this the most, as Jupiter's your chart ruler. Maybe Gemini risings as well. And we're going to see Jupiter retrograde until about the beginning of February of 2025, and then it's going to go direct. So it's going to be for quite some time. In terms of the best, most challenging and days to kind of be aware, so I did kind of throw a list together for you equally down below. I will put all of the transits for the month so you can take a look at that. But like I said, I also cover that on my horoscopes. For me, the two best days of October are definitely going to be October 4th and October 8th. So when I look at these two particular days, obviously today is the Kazimi, so you guys are probably feeling that right now as the Mercury and the Sun are coming together. And then the second is the eclipse, and then the 4th is when we are going to have a, Venus in Scorpio, trine Saturn in Pisces, okay? It looks like it's going to be at 14 degrees. I like this for strengthening relationships, contracts, negotiations, financial dealings, anything like that. Also kind of leaning into the 5th, as you'll see the moon meet with Venus. You guys heard me talk about that on my astro weather, about how this can be good for, you know, obviously date night and things like that, but it's also can be about, you know, like reworking something about an investment strategy, rethinking something about, you know, what you're investing, what you're buying in, what you have, or what you're selling, because there's a lot of like financial restructuring that can happen with this. So the 4th into the 5th, I think, are really good days if you have to make big decisions revolving around love, business, money, relationships. But the key here is change, because we have so many aspects. Mars connecting to Venus, right? Moon and Venus in Scorpio. Also, you know, it is ruling the eclipse as well as Libra's season. So it's like we're really feeling our way into some of the bigger changes and transformations around the 4th and the 5th that I think we're kind of set into motion, or whatever, you know, catalysts for change came up during the solar eclipse on the 2nd. We're really feeling within about 2 days. Now, the other days that I like are going to be when Mercury comes into a trine with Jupiter in Gemini, and that's going to be on the 8th. So this is an overall good news, optimistic transit, being able to share something, being enthusiastic, especially because it's at a 21. This could also be about global news that's about airplanes, international travel, laws, legality, court decisions that impact people, you know, in a very big way. This is reactivating some degrees connected to other eclipses that we have had in Libra. And the moon, it will oppose Jupiter this day and sextile Mercury. So there's some big communication kind of going on. The other thing that you're going to be seeing is that Mars and Venus are going to trine each other on this day. So we've got the North Node ruler, the South Node ruler, Mars and Venus in harmony. Still in a loose trine to Saturn, and this is after the new moon. So it can be a time where if you want to make a big commitment, a big announcement, especially about alliances, mergers, new relationships, proposals, marriages, weddings, things like that, because you are going to have Mercury and Juno together, trining Jupiter, which can be saying that there's more of a theme of like communicating and talking to people who are committed with, and finding ways to open up dialogue, or, you know, reading new things together, learning new things together. So this is a really great communication day. The other day that I like is going to be when the sun is coming into a trine with Jupiter. However, when we have this trine, it looks like the moon is in Pisces. So it is kind of quincunx, this energy. It is coming into conjunction with Saturn. You know, Venus at this time is also in opposition to Uranus. And even though the sun trine Jupiter is generally a pretty positive day, the Venus-Uranus takes away from that. It does make me feel like there's a lot of people feeling stretched financially or in their relationships, and like sudden changes happening. We also see the moon conjuncting Saturn, which could be some more difficult, challenging emotions and feelings. And the sun is in a square to Mars. So yes, it is sun trine Jupiter. I don't want to take away from that. Good positive news, great for learning, great for travel. But I feel like, in a nutshell, October says that we're going to learn a lot through difficult times. We're going to learn a lot through not always agreeing or seeing eye to eye. We're going to, you know, have to learn how to work together, or we're going to have to learn how to be more diplomatic with others, because it beats the alternative of just kind of like being scrappy and fighting it out, you know, and not allowing ourselves to get too intertwined or up in arms over conflict, because that's almost distracting and like perpetuating some of the problems, especially on this day. So sun in opposition to Chiron. So yeah, you may hear some astrologers that say, oh my God, sun trine, you know, Jupiter, it's this amazing day. And I would say, yes, it can be, but there's way too many other things going on in the background. So for me, my favorite days, the best days to work with this month, I think are going to be the 4th or the 8th of October. Now, for the days that you're going to want to really try, okay, these are the days that are going to test you guys a little bit, where you want to really prioritize partnership, working together, having clear communication, trying to be, you know, helping other people, being a team player, you know, helping your friends, family, your partners, your coworkers out, and like really being aware that there is going to be a little bit more conflict out in the air, okay? We've got the 6th of October, and the 6th is when we start to see Mercury, planet of communication, at a 17, squaring with Mars, okay? So this is where it's like, let's do it together, and Mars in Cancer is like, leave me alone. You know, so this can be fighting words. This can be literally like conflict over in-laws and relationships, or, you know, roommates, or, you know, between partners at home, and some kind of conflict or housing wars. Now we could see major changes with the housing market and people arguing, saying we should move, or we should put our house up for sale, or we need support with this house matter, or whatever. But this is a day where you're more likely to have a little bit of a tiff when it comes to communication. In the background, that Venus is coming into a trine with Mars. So a little bit of friction, a little bit of like, you know, emotions, maybe, you know, a little bit of tit for tat can be good, because it can give us the opportunity to have a little bit of like chemistry. And if we're learning to kind of be playful, because this is at a 17, and kind of, you know, joke around and not take life so seriously, we won't take some of the things that are kind of coming up so personally. But this is definitely a day where you're going to get tested when it comes to communication. Now, another difficult or challenging aspect, but I think you guys can work through this, is going to be right around the 13th. And this is a day where you have some sweet and salty aspects. Number one, now we've got Mercury at a critical degree of 29 coming in to square Pluto at 29. So this is like, I call this the interrogation aspect. I kind of feel like it is. There is some sense of pressing somebody for, you know, communication, for working together, for trying to get to the heart of an issue or a matter. Mercury at critical 29 degrees can kind of feel like mentally we're really like fit to be tied. We're exhausted having certain conversations or working through certain issues, or maybe we feel like we keep hitting the same problems in relationships over and over, and it's bringing up some kind of like mental purge or like breakdown with the squares to Pluto. Pluto is in like the final throes of Capricorn, by the way. By the time we get to the 3rd week of November, Pluto's back in Aquarius, and it is there to stay for the better part of the next 20 years. At this point in time, Pluto is also direct. So some of the conflict, the shadow, the hidden things, the pain, the challenges we've been coming, kind of coming to realize that are still hanging around, will be very present when it comes to our communications. And this is a day that we want to be mindful of our tone and how we're getting the point across to people, and how we're dealing maybe with business partnerships, clients, how we're dealing with superiors. And this can be a day where there is some very critical information or news drops that can be kind of coming out in the world. And, you know, Mercury and the sun, anything going through Libra, it is in a superior position challenging Pluto. So that's why I do feel like it is possible, even though the squares between Libra and Pluto are not fun, that if we have the right support system, the right person, if we have the right, partner, the right therapist, anything like that, anything that's going to be a one-on-one relationship, it can help us overcome some of these long-standing kind of Plutonian issues. Now, on the same day, you will also see, like I said, the sun is starting to come into a trine with Jupiter. So even though this is really difficult, kind of critical, like nails on a chalkboard, when you're trying to communicate, the sun in Libra trine Jupiter means that a right person can pop up and say, hey, let me help you, or I have some good news for you, or like, let me teach you how to like overcome this situation. So it can be a wonderful day where, yeah, there's a little bit of pressure, but if we work together, we can find a way through. Then you're going to see on the 14th, this is when the sun is kind of in its several day long square with Mars. So we have sun in Libra squaring Mars in Cancer, which does make me feel like there can be some struggles and some ego issues in relationships that are coming up, especially if we're needing to grow in relationships. That's creating some real challenges, conflict, or some passive aggressiveness that can be happening in the Cancer area of our chart. This is also an aspect that can be about home protection and whether or not you're bringing in, the right company to remodel your floors or set up a security alarm or, install a kitchen sink or, be building a pool, that kind of stuff, because this is about, who you're choosing to kind of bring into your private space and kind of have an action or something they need to kind of work on or do. If not, then it's going to be about the relationship that you have to your home and the people that are within it, and maybe relatives or roommates or, anybody who kind of like resides within your home. Obviously, this is general. I'm speaking about it generally, so it's going to be different for everybody. But this is setting up the stage for, the need to do Mars things, be the first, be active, take some kind of initiative, not waiting for other people to tell us, hey, you need to do this, just being like more assertive and aware of what we need to do to make sure that our homes are safe, our families are safe, our communities are safe, that we have what we need that are like Mars related things in the home, and whether that's like matches, firewood, a propane tank, some food in the fridge, things like that. You guys are going to see that this is where, if we do not have what we need on the home front, and if there is some looming fears of not having enough of something or not having the support maybe of something outside of ourselves, the increased pressure that then kind of comes up within relationships, right? So we want to be working together as a team and maybe having discussions about emergency plans at home, or what we need to do or what actions we need to take with our families to kind of feel like our home is a little bit more so protected, so we're not feeling like we're kind of under the time crunch in the off chance that something were to happen. When the sun is in Libra square Mars, this can also be conflict literally with men. Men can be Mars and the sun, and there can also be some heated tension that's going on between, basically some kind of partnership or ally and some kind of home country or some kind of like military operation that can be going on. So in the background, Israel's chart, NATO's chart, Iran's chart, they're all getting lit up with some of these eclipses and some of the aspects that are getting ready to set up in the skies between now and next spring. So I would assume, these are going to be some of the cast of characters that are going to have to do with some of the intensity, the standoffs, the back and forth, the bickering that can be happening. But I try not to put too much energy into that. I try not to give that too much thought, because I'm optimistic that, we have the opportunity to actually overcome conflict and war and hate by realizing that we're all in the same boat, that if we continue to perpetuate this conflict and also endless wars, or continuing the bickering, amongst ourselves, we're not really going to get where we want to go. And we can use the pressure of Pluto and Mars this month to really incentivize us to say, you know what, I actually want to feel in control. I want to feel like I can take charge of a situation. I don't want to feel like something is, dictating or kind of hovering over me anymore. So be careful what you give energy to. Be careful what you're feeding with some of these transits. You're going to hear a lot of people talking about some stuff that can be kind of scary. And while some of that stuff is possible, at the end of the day, you're creating your own reality. And when you're dealing with all of these water trines in the sky, where intention and emotion flows, energy goes. So we want to be mindful of what we're giving energy to, right? If we're thinking worst case scenario, well, if that ultimately would manifest, especially I think about traditional medieval astrologers, and they would talk about, solar eclipses and, death of kings and, rulers and all of these things. And they saw it as a negative omen. And I think if we think that way, we're more likely to manifest that stuff and see it out in the world, rather than looking at this more symbolically and going well, this is the end of one phase, we're bringing in another. And if it's something that isn't true diplomacy or balance or support, then, it's kind of getting eclipsed out of our life. The other transit that I have for you guys, that's a day that you're going to want to work with, which I actually think can be beneficial. Outside of this Sun square Mars. And by the way, the same day, we're also seeing Venus starting to oppose Uranus. So, relationships, money, everything has a bit of a curveball where you don't really know where something's going to go. Venus is the dispositor of Uranus, and it's debilitated in Scorpio. It doesn't really matter what it's trining or making aspects to. The likelihood is like the 14th and the 15th we can see with just the Venus-Uranus opposition, and also the moon approaching Saturn and Neptune, that there is some major fluctuations and spikes when it comes to the markets, goods, bonds, major economic shifts, and we're now starting to feel the slowdown because Jupiter is now retrograde. And Jupiter is directly tied to all of these planets in Pisces. So Moon Saturn could be like more storm stuff. It could be more things revolving around limitations of supplies, issues with importing and exporting, somehow things slowing down, being able to get goods, in and out of ports, right? Pisces. So we can see that being a theme, especially stuff tied that can be to like water, gases, medication, oil, that kind of stuff can kind of pop up. And the opposition to Uranus is like bread, grains, textiles, fabrics, clothing, that kind of stuff. That's the stuff that might get hit the hardest with this particular opposition. But just remember that it's a bit of a curveball. Anything goes with that aspect. We do see more stress and tension in relationships as well with Venus opposed Uranus. And then the 24th, where, this is, I think, a day where you're going to feel a little bit more incentivized. This is when you see Mars making a sextile, beginning to make a sextile to Uranus. So where Uranus in Taurus is about unconventional, unexpected change, breakdown, breakthrough, shifts of values, style, money, resources, that sextile to Mars makes me feel like this is where people are pivoting. They're thinking on their feet. They're able to kind of tap into their emotional drive, their emotional needs, and go, okay, this is how I'm going to overcome this challenge, or this is this kind of, workaround that I have for something. And Taurus is about land. It's about money and food. And Cancer is about security, home, property, privacy, that kind of stuff. And so I could see this as being some people being very creative when it comes to, making changes in their home, or, making shifts revolving around, how they are eating, or how they're spending money, or how they're shopping, or how they're storing food. That stuff might actually be kind of coming up here towards the end of October. So I think we'll feel a little bit more incentivized to make change. And obviously sextiles are kind of friendly. So it'll be interesting to see how that's kind of playing out, especially given like the moon Mars is going to come into connection. It looks like the day before in sextile Uranus. You might feel even a little bit earlier. And Mars is starting to trine with Neptune. So we're starting to kind of feel in line with where we feel like we're meant to go, and letting kind of our intuition lead the way. So there's a lot of water stuff kind of going on that you guys are going to have to pay attention to your emotions, because it's going to be telling you something. For the more challenging days, okay, so these are the days that I think are going to be a little bit more difficult to navigate. Obviously, I got to start with the 2nd of October because we have that solar eclipse. And yes, even though I'm trying to see the positive in this, that, the trine to Jupiter is we're learning something, we're learning how to communicate. There's something good that will actually come from kind of clearing the air and shaking out some of this stuff that's kind of coming up right now. It's still a solar eclipse. And for some of you guys, you've already started feeling it the last couple of days. For some of you guys, you may not really feel the effects for a couple of weeks into maybe even next spring. But this is definitely almost like the appetizer and the setup for, oh, well, here's an eclipse, with Mercury cazimi, lots of information of what we got to release. And we're at a turning point because Libra is the midpoint between Capricorn, our career status, long-term goal, and Cancer, home family stuff. And this could quite literally mean there's just huge turning points going on in relationships right now, revolving around where have we been and where are we going? And how are we navigating home, or how are we navigating family, or how are we navigating work? And it does require, the need to kind of like hear everybody out and sit down and kind of talk about what's the best way forward. That's the only way through it. But it's interesting that this is how the month starts, and then you'll see all these planets kind of square off with each other. So I do feel like that's obviously most intense for Libra, rising suns and moons, especially if you have anything, I would say, within 8 to about 12 degrees of Libra. You're going to be feeling that the most, as well as the cardinal signs. So Aries, Cancer, and Capricorn, you guys can be feeling that as well. check out my video on the eclipse if you guys want to hear what I think is coming. Something else that I kind of picked up here, I was looking at this and I went, wow, this is the last time that we're going to see a quarter moon happening between Libra and Capricorn. And this is right before Pluto goes direct. So I mean, sometimes I'll talk about the quarter moons in my reports or whatever, you know, for the weekly. And I might for this one, but I was just looking at this and I went, all right, well, that's the solar eclipse on the 2nd. And then we come into the 10th and the moon's going through Capricorn and it's going to square off with the sun. So this is the first quarter square and the moon is debilitated in Capricorn. It's doing emotional labor. This might be a day you want to watch, like the 10th and the 11th, as the moon go through Capricorn and come into conjunction with Pluto, and it's squaring off with Mercury and Chiron. Because this is the first hurdle since the solar eclipse, and it's kind of setting the stage for what ultimately may come around the full moon in Aries around the 17th. And obviously Capricorn is about government and leaders and, you know, older people in society, and like, you know, Pluto being in the last degrees here and also getting ready to go direct, like just keep in mind, Pluto's going to be pulling some dirty tricks. Every single time we see the moon cross Pluto now for the next month or so, or square or oppose it, something is going to be afoot. You guys are going to see some weird power plays going on out in the world. So I'm looking at this around, you know, the 10th in the evening, going into the morning of the 11th. And I feel like there can definitely be some stuff happening. Because then on the 11th, right after the moon leaves Pluto, Pluto goes direct. And usually when we see a planet go direct, we see the themes revolving around that planet in a very big way out in the world. So moon conjuncts it. We're all going through an emotional purge. We're seeing some shocks, scares, and surprises revolving around big changes with power out in the world. And it's also squaring Mercury. So there is some like really colorful information, I think, that's kind of coming out, or somebody who is challenging the narrative of leadership, and then Pluto wakes up. So that 10th, 11th, I would pay attention to, because I think we're going to see some potential significant events happening, especially with Pluto in conjunction with the transit moon. Okay, so Pluto goes direct on the 11th. From here forward, it is moving towards Aquarius. By the time we get to the 3rd week of November, it will be in Aquarius and it will no longer be in Capricorn. So I would have to say my late degree cardinal signs are probably going to be thrilled that now you get a bit of a pass. Obviously, now it's moving into Aquarius. So Aquarius, you're kind of now in the hot seat. And Pluto rules Scorpio. So for Scorpio and Scorpio rising, this is going to be a big change for you, because now it's going back into that area of your chart. So it's going back into your 4th house, Scorpio. You may want to reflect. I think everybody should reflect on where we've been the last like year and a half. You know, we've had Pluto go in and out of Aquarius. To be honest with you, you know, Capricorn is so slow. I mean, they're both Saturn signs, but it's a cardinal earth sign ruled by Saturn. You know, it takes a long time to work through the issues and the power struggles, and, you know, and it's also like very challenging, because there is this kind of form that you have to kind of follow, and it's a lot of death of the old ways, I think, with Pluto and Capricorn. So Pluto and Aquarius, I feel like change comes much more quickly, information comes much more quickly, things are more radical. There is a lot more rebelliousness, there is a lot more shocks and surprises about the future and technology and, you know, AI and space and astrology even. So and the masses are certainly going through some major shock, because Aquarius represents the awakening, right? It's you know, ruled by Uranus, which is about basically, you know, giving fire, you know, to people. It's the gods intervening and kind of saying, hey, you know, don't you want to be liberated? Don't you want to be free? And freedom can be a scary thing for people who maybe don't know how to wield it, or you know, maybe the topic of freedom can be very sensitive and a little bit more touchy or taboo right now. People who've always thought that they have freedom, realizing that, you know, that may not be the case. So there's definitely a very different vibe to Pluto and Aquarius. And I haven't experienced it long enough to tell you which one I prefer. But I can tell you, being a cardinal rising, cardinal moon, I'm ready for it to leave Capricorn. So we'll see. That the jury's still out on that. What do you guys think? You guys let me know which one you prefer. So what we're then going to see is on the 13th, we're going to see Mars in Cancer come into a square with Chiron. So that'll be around that 21 degrees. And so this is the same day. You know, I gave you this date, I think, twice. I said the 13th can be great because you're going to see, you know, Sun trine Jupiter. But it's also challenging because you've got 21, 21, 21, and we're really splitting hairs here. It's wide, but I mean, technically that's a grand cardinal cross, but if you include Pluto. But if you're just looking at the 21s, this makes Mars the focal point of a T-square between Chiron. So it's like personal wounding, issues with feeling isolated, alone because of conflict, you know, destruction, devastation, you know, hot emotions, issues where we're reacting, changes with our home and our family that sever and separate us from support from other people. And then you add Pluto into the mix. Oof. You know, 13th of October is a difficult day. I'm going to keep saying it. I know that's not what everybody wants to hear, but that's a day that I would proceed with caution, just with everything that I can kind of see going on in the skies. Now Mars becomes the focal point of the T-square between Chiron and the Sun, and to which we want to look at the moon because it is ruled by Cancer. Well, the moon's coming and approaching a conjunction to Saturn, hardening, things revolving around borders, boundaries, bridges, things revolving around dams and levees, water, right? Support and water. And also it can be about, you know, hospitals or things revolving around people who are lost or need to be found or need some kind of assistance, or homelessness, issues with immigration. So the moon approaching Saturn, trining Mars, does make me feel like there can be some emotional relief, but it does look like it's going to be some heavy stuff. And yeah, anytime you see Mars in a hard angle with Chiron, I mean, we can be more prone to wounding. We can be more prone. I have thought for some time with Mars square Chiron and a bunch of planets in the 7th house and opposed Pluto, lock your back doors, you know, make sure that you guys have your security systems on. We're going to see more home break-ins. We're going to see intruders, especially in areas where they may be looting and other things going on because of the storms or because of some, you know, other circumstance that's going on in a specific area. I say storms because of all the water stuff that's getting activated. You know, you could see homes, you could see stores and things that are being looted. But it doesn't have to be in an area where you're experiencing storms. This could be in other places because Cancer does represent kind of like, you know, the suburbs, right? So we could see that some areas where they wouldn't usually have some of those issues, we're seeing more of those issues. And Mars and also Scorpio and also Neptune can all be about crime. So this is a time where I would be more aware of locking front and back doors, locking cars, you know, making sure that you have cameras on, security systems on, things like that, especially as we are starting to approach Mars opposition to Pluto. Right? So we can see more issues with domestic violence, but we can also see more issues with there being some sense of like a threatening presence or energy. You know, Pluto in Capricorn is about police. It is about people who are in uniforms. We saw this in, you know, 2020, 2021, 2022 with the Black Lives Matter stuff. All that Pluto, Saturn, Jupiter stuff was things revolving around police, laws and police brutality, and whether or not there was good interactions that we had with people who were basically serving communities. And so think of Cancer as women, mothers, children. It can also be about, you know, homeland security, things revolving around your home property. And this standoff that's getting ready to happen with Pluto and Capricorn, like, I'm not going to tell people what to do. I'm not an attorney. But I will tell you that it's a good time to know your rights and whether or not you feel comfortable, you know, communicating should, God forbid, somebody come to your front door or anything like that. You know, I would say just know your state and local and federal rights revolving around your ability to decide whether or not, you know, you're going to remain silent because we can see some issues revolving around threatening civilians or things like that are going on in certain neighborhoods and communities, or people feeling threatened because they're noticing that there's going to be more police presence and things like that are going to be kind of taking place, as much as I hate to say that. I would also say, because we've got Jupiter square Saturn, this can also be a time where we can see more issues where there are unusual characters and stuff that are kind of moving into neighborhoods, or we're seeing just major demographic changes in certain areas because this does deal with mutable signs. So changes to demographics within certain areas, and feeling like maybe your neighborhood is becoming a little unrecognizable, or that there's just some significant changes that are going on and you're noticing that, especially with Jupiter retrograde. And then with Mars, coming into shadow and opposing Pluto, to me, this is kind of like the Hades Persephone aspects, especially starting to see Venus sextile. For the rest of the year, knowing where your kids are after dark, knowing where you should or should not be parking in certain areas, women being more alert when they're going out and they're walking around in parking lots, or they're coming and going from work. Like, Mars is about self-protection, right? And in Cancer, it's about women knowing how to protect themselves, knowing how to defend themselves, especially if they're in areas where they're feeling like they could potentially not be safe, right? And then we throw some energies with Libra, which can be about some conflict involving another person and we've potentially got what could be a very heated situation. So it's not just about keeping yourself safe or your home safe. It's also about keeping an eye on your community and, looking out for other people. And if you see something going on that that is not right, or if that, somebody's kids are out, playing after dark, and, you want to keep an eye on them and make sure that they're okay, or that their parents know where they are. These are some things that I would be doing, because I see a lot of issues with either abduction, usually happen under retrogrades in opposition to Pluto or in squares to Pluto. And this energy, unfortunately, is only going to be increasing as we get to the end of October, as Mars starts to come into an opposition with Pluto. We are also going to see on, let's see, what other day did I have here? We're going to see on the 17th, there's going to be a full moon in Aries, which is like, I keep saying this is like the Hellraiser moon. But it is. We have a full moon in Aries at 24 degrees. So it's opposing the sun in Libra and Juno. So this can be bringing up themes revolving around relationships, partnerships, and diplomacy. And this is ruled by, obviously, by Mars, right? Because it's a full moon in Aries. And so look, it's about a degree and a half off from being a square to Mars. So it's still bringing up that same sun square, Mercury square that we saw earlier in the month. And now it's making Mars the focal point, and it's still creating a grand cardinal cross. Moon conjunct Aries, emotional healing, hot tempers, full moon in Aries, we're more focused on what we need, what we want. We're taking action in some way. And then Mars becomes the focal point of this particular square. So even though the full moon's going to be in the Aries area of your life, it is being intensified. It's being, kind of pushed to the limit or to the brink, where something almost kind of just like pops because of some action that's going on in Cancer in the chart, where it can be incredibly emotional, because we've got mutual reception between Mars and the moon in, a Mars sign, Mars in a moon sign, and they square each other. The good news is that for some people, even though this may bring some intense issues with emotions, it can feel like a call to action. And, a moon like this, for the right person, it can feel very energizing and a need to, create change. You just want to really caution against any impulsive decisions or any reactions that are driven by past patterns. That's very Mars in Cancer. And this is a moon where you want to reflect before you react, especially in situations that can stir up some very strong feelings. Especially considering this is at a 24, it's a Pisces degree, so it's going to be very emotional, very sensitive. People can be acting, a little bit more, like a little bit more Pisces-like, where, we aren't aware of what's influencing us and kind of impacting us. It's kind of coming out of like nowhere. And, that square to Mars, you know, really makes me feel like this is going to be a significant turning point for individuals who have been kind of really going through the ringer with relationships throughout the month. And then this could be that breaking point where someone's like, that's it, you know, I'm moving out. Like literally Mars and Cancer square, you know, Aries and Libra can be, you know, now we're selling the house, now we're moving, you know, now we're changing jobs, now we're moving in together. Maybe now we're, you know, buying our first home. I mean, it's not all negative, but there is definitely going to be a need to work together and be more mindful of our emotional reactions here. And on the 22nd, you guys are going to see the Sun in Libra then come in for the square with Pluto. So where Venus squared that, you know, earlier in September, Mercury squared that, and that brought up some of the difficult conversations earlier in the month. Now the Sun squares Pluto. That, to me, they may all be tied together. You know, Sun square Pluto can be about an ending of a leader of some kind. It can be a critical turning point where there is some legal decision or some decision that's made revolving around the courts, especially as it pertains to power, control, you know, corruption, big business, manipulation. But these are at critical degrees. 29 is about an ending. Right? And right when that's happening, we're also starting to see Venus coming into a square with Saturn. So that's also indicating there's some change on the horizon with relationships. I feel like because Mars is so close, you know, and it'll probably be the 22nd into the 23rd, that this is going to get there we go, kind of kicked up because now the moon meets with Mars and it's still squaring. Even though the sun has changed degrees, it's still bringing that up. So it'll be like the 22nd and the 23rd. Sun square Pluto can be like where we're removing something from our life, especially if we feel like it's been heavy or toxic or you know, there is some exposure of crime or corruption or some major change that kind of goes on in a relationship. And we're finally like, okay, you know, we're now releasing this thing. So that's kind of in the air as well. Watch out for like scandals, sex scandals, major political or financial scandals, things like that. Relationships, partnerships, shocking and surprising duos and people coming together who we never anticipated may work together or partner together can come up as well. Especially if there's a common agenda, there's a common goal, a reason to work together to, you know, challenge something about some kind of power struggle out in the world or corruption of power. I really think that that's what some of these transits may actually be about. Very same day on the 22nd, going into the 23rd, we also see Mercury trine Saturn. So looks like that's more on the 22nd. But this is a good aspect for communication, commitment, signing, you know, a contract, a lease, a business deal, you know, creating a boundary, committing to something. So it's almost like the Sun square Pluto is, okay, this is the final line. Like this is now dying off. We're done. This is the final planet square off with Pluto, by the way, before Pluto changes signs. So, you know, we think about all this Libra stuff that's happened all month long where it's like, okay, well, you know, did we finally overcome the challenge? Did we finally work through it? Or like, did it take us out? Right? That's really the question. Is Pluto going to win, or is, you know, kind of balance and partnership and diplomacy going to win? Or are you going to allow the problem to become so big that it overcomes, you know, the best relationships and the best teams? It can happen. It really depends on your own personal placements. But I like the Mercury trine Saturn where we can be like, okay, this ends here, you know, or this is what we've agreed to. This is what we're deciding on. We're finally burying the hatchet. You know, we're kind of putting this in the past. And then on the 28th of the month, we will see Venus come into a square with Saturn in Pisces. So Venus, superior position, so that's positive, but the square to Saturn generally does not bode well for good financial transactions, you know, beauty related things, like that kind of stuff generally does not go well with a Venus square Saturn. So this is going to be the 28th. With Venus in Sag, this does deal with import, export, international goods, colleges, things revolving around culture, stuff revolving around airlines, luxury, travel, that kind of stuff. And Venus squaring Saturn means that if we do see some of these issues with Pisces related things, whether it's health related stuff, if it's going to be gas or oil related, if it's going to be about limitation storms, issues with transportation borders. You know, this can make it more challenging to kind of get out, get about, and go places. And this is not the day to be making big financial investments, purchases, you know, talking about long-term commitments, trying to actually initiate a relationship or some kind of business partnership. I would not do it under that transit, especially because we're going to have the moon in opposition square Venus is what it looks like too. So we're going to need a little bit of time to kind of wait for that to come out of that aspect. And then we're going to see on the 30th, it looks like Mercury will oppose Uranus. So we're going to have Mercury in Scorpio, where it's kind of deep and pensive and it's doing its thing, where it's reevaluating or researching and kind of trying to get to the bottom of something. And obviously, you know, Uranus is where we kind of feel like we stuck our finger in a light socket. You know, we're kind of like high on caffeine, kind of like, you know, all just lit up and buzzed. And Mercury in opposition to Uranus can usually be some shocking and surprising news, some unexpected news that we didn't see coming. That kind of comes out of left field. And it does look like this is right around the time the moon is crossing the south node, reactivating the solar eclipse in Libra we'll have at the beginning of the month, coming into a dark moon in Scorpio, which is ruled by Mars and Pluto, and Mars is in opposition to Pluto. And that's a whole other thing. If you guys haven't already seen my Mars and Cancer video, check it out. I feel like there's two sides of the Mars transit here. You know, where, you know, Mercury is trining Mars, so we can feel incentivized to take action, create change in some way. I also feel like the shocks and surprise might be like the information is too much for some people, or they're too mentally stimulated, or they feel like there's too much something going on. I think I have thought for some time with this building up aspect, sometime around the 3rd or 4th week of October, we may see some major communication outages, some major issues. As I'm filming this, actually, the day before you guys watch this, there was a huge outage that we had, I guess, for, I think it was for Verizon. So will that continue? Possibly. I think, you know, Uranus is electricity, Mercury is communications. So I think I saw it anywhere from like the 15th through the 30th of October that we could see another major communications outage. And well, Mercury is cell phones and the dispositor is Mars, which is in opposition to Pluto. So whether it's because power lines go down or there's issues with, you know, cell phone towers, or there's issues because of storms, I don't know, but I am anticipating possibly some major outages, if not of media and communications. It can be like power outages in certain areas. So you guys have been forewarned. I do think that the other side of this is, you know, like I said, Mars coming into an opposition with Pluto, which it will happen several times throughout the Mars retrograde. So this is just the first one that's setting up, you know, kind of like Halloween into the beginning of October, into the beginning of November, that Mars makes its first opposition with Pluto, but it's happening at a critical degree. So it's going to be happening at like 29 degrees, which is that tipping point. And now Pluto is awake. So oppositions are 180 degrees, they're standoffs. You know, Pluto wants power and control, wants to dictate and determine what's going to happen and when, and Mars in Cancer is feeling extremely threatened and does not want its home or anything messed with. It does not want to be bothered. It does not want people in its space. And this is, I almost see it as like a conjunction. It's relational. They might as well be conjunct. And Mars and Pluto is about extreme power. It's about transformation, healing, but it's also about conflict, purging, war, death, illness, sickness. I mean, like some really gnarly stuff. So I would be watching on the 30th and the 31st, especially as the moon is going through Libra and it's going to come into a trine in the late degrees on Halloween morning, by the way. Moon square Mars, moon square Pluto. Moon square Pluto, that's pretty scary for Halloween. But Mars square moon square Pluto. See, for me, I look at this and I'm like, that's when things are really going to start to turn. And once again, my predictions are based purely off the astrology. I do not care what's going on out in the world. I care about what's going on my software on the screen. So anything I'm telling you is not based off of the fact that people are knowing, you know, we're coming into U.S. elections in early November. It's more just the setup for the Mars-Pluto opposition, which I think is going to be very, very, very gnarly in some places. The other side is that, you know, we will see Mars trining Neptune, which means that we can take action and be compassionate and caring and sympathetic and help others in need and be there to support people and get there and help them, you know, especially if they're sick or if they're homeless or they need food, or if people are in areas that are affected by weather, that we can band together, we can help each other, right? We can support other people. And Mars is a very entrepreneurial, can do, figure it out, do it yourself attitude. And Mars in Cancer, it could be some women that are like, you know, bring your families over here, you know, stay on our couch, we'll make you guys some food, we'll get you some clothes. They could be some grandmothers that are taking it upon themselves to be coming in and helping people plant food or helping people kind of preserve food or store food. It could be, you know, people who are literally living together, supporting one another, and Cancer is about family. And so what we're going to be recognizing and realizing is that it doesn't really matter our ethnicity or our social background, where we come from, our religion, you know, our political beliefs. It's going to be more about, are we all making the necessary, you know, decisions and doing the things that we need to do in order to be able to ensure that we all have safe, healthy, happy homes, that we have a place that we can kind of call home. That's what Cancer is about. So there's going to be a lot of people needing, I think, to get, you know, more comfortable maybe with their communities, and maybe meeting and making friends in the neighborhood and coming to other people's aids and like looking out for other people. And I think that that can be something that can be more challenging maybe to find in like more urban areas. But I would encourage you guys to explore more, especially with Jupiter retrograde, explore more and get to know your neighbors and your community a little bit better, because you know, when Mars starts opposing Pluto, we're either going to kind of lean into the kind of conflict, and there's going to be something outside of ourselves that's going to be kind of pressuring us or making us feel a little bit scared, or we're going to lean into the trine to Neptune, which is going to be about kind of dissolving kind of the boundaries and the borders that we have with other people, and like, you know, being able to see people just as people and not feeling like we need to label people or kind of make people feel unwelcome or unwanted just because we come from different backgrounds or different walks of life. I think that's really what this is going to be about, that you're going to see people look beyond some of those more superficial kind of divisive titles that we've been seeing in recent years. Like I said, this will play out throughout the Mars retrograde, so we won't really see Mars retrogrades beginning of December, but when it does, then when it comes back and it opposes Pluto another 2 times, okay? So we're going to see that happening, I think, in December and then in April. Then it'll be Mars in Leo, Pluto in Aquarius, which is a completely different vibe. You know, Mars in Leo is going to be more about children. It's going to be more about leaders. It's going to be more about military, young men. You know, this is also when we see a lot more drama going on in our love lives. And Pluto in Aquarius, which is going to be more about the older generations, right? Older, you know, people who maybe have been involved in, you know, leadership roles or politics or anything like that. We're going to see new leaders emerge, basically. That's what's going to happen. You guys remember Mercury went retrograde through Leo, right? And then last year, Venus went retrograde through Leo. So there's been a lot of activations in the Leo area of our chart in recent years, and now Mars is going to come through there, and it's going to square off with Pluto, and I think this is going to be where you see new leaders and younger people who are emerging, new creatives, new artists, you know, new performers who are really kind of saying like, you know, I'm going to stand up basically against the system, and we may see some individuals that are really trying to stand out and kind of push back against some like newer, more kind of like radical agendas with Pluto and Aquarius, and some radical transformations also revolving around the internet and technology and, you know, the future. So you will start to feel that intensity right around the end of the month. Obviously, if you're a Mars ruled sign, or if you are a Pluto ruled sign, so basically my Aries and also my my Scorpios, I think you guys are really going to be feeling that. It is on the axis of Cancer and Capricorn, so you guys are going to be feeling that too, especially if you're in the later degrees. And everybody feels it. I mean, there isn't one sign that I think is going to feel it more than the other. It might be a little louder for some of the cardinal signs, especially, you know, looking at all of them. But Mars rules the North Node, so we are all going to be in like this period of a very extended Mars and Cancer transit, and it'll be interesting to see what the effects are in Capricorn and Cancer versus when it's in you know, in Leo and Aquarius, because it's going to have a bit of a different flavor. That is the month at a glance. So I hope that was helpful in kind of giving you guys a little bit of food for thought and how to navigate that. The best days, the worst days, the we work together days. Please don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Leave me a comment below if you like this video, if it's helpful for you. Let me know what you're feeling about the transits. What are you looking forward to? What are you planning? And what do you think about some of these aspects in the month ahead? Do not forget to check out your horoscopes if you want to see how this is impacting you personally. And I will be back here to chat with you guys on Thursday. Enjoy the eclipse. I hope it's a good one for all of you. And when we're back here on Thursday, we're going to talk about this up and coming full moon in Aries. We're going to tackle that. So until next time, I'll see all of you very soon. And I'm wishing you a very, very, very special, peaceful, calm, abundant, transformative month of October. Until next time, take care.